think it's up that way. This is it, huh?
Culture in your neighborhood, you know.
You're right.
Hi.
I mean, it's
Hi there.
I mean, it's fine if like you're new to town and you're like, wow.
Hello.
I met you at Heartland Cafe.
I met you at
Heartland Cafe.
Oh, yes.
We're the video
yes,
people, and we're going to put you on the video at the Heartland Media channel.
Really? You know, see, I don't get cable.
Pardon?
I said I don't get cable. I don't have cable TV in my house.
No, well, this is not. You got on the internet.
Oh.
You can see YouTube.
Oh.
YouTube.com.
Oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't come through in the BlackBerry.
No, it doesn't come through a BlackBerry.
Admission is on the...
Well, thank you. This is a real honor. So I'm going to take just about 5 minutes to kind of tell you about the sort of stuff that we do to kind of explain the award a little bit. And so, let me put this here. So in 2008, I started doing a series of kind of walking tours, often with a focus on labor history, although I'm interested in a variety of topics. And then I decided to branch out, and because I was interested in the different forms that are used to kind of like narrate history, right, in sort of popular forms. So you have walking tours, you have lectures, but then you also have reenactments, right? And reenactments are almost solely reserved for events from our country's martial past. So Civil War reenactments, Revolutionary War reenactments. There are some crazy cats who like to pretend that they're French voyagers and hell down the river and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's kind of military focused. And I was also kind of like really interested in that a lot of sort of labor history either doesn't get taught in high schools, or you can take labor history classes often in college if you want to. But a lot of these sort of narratives have been kind of obscured or erased. So our first attempt at a kind of reenactment was at the 1877 Battle of the Halstead Viaduct, which maybe some of you guys know about. But a lot of people have completely forgotten that this incident ever occurred, even though several people died as a result of it. And this was during a sort of nationwide railroad strike that occurred all across the country. It spread from the East Coast, starting in the Baltimore area, going all the way west to San Francisco. But Chicago, because it was a major transit hub, was one of the sort of centers of the strike. And this was in the middle of a kind of economic crisis, and railroads basically colluded to across the board cut the wages of all their employees. So these spontaneous strikes broke out across the country. And near the Burlington-Quincy lines in the viaduct at 16th and Halstead, there was a violent confrontation between police and between laborers. But what made this a significant event is that this is one of the first times that various populations within the city put aside their kind of ethnic differences and kind of worked together. So the Polish and Czech and Slovak workers in the Pilsen area were joined in solidarity by the Irish laborers coming up from Bridgeport. And so we decided to recreate this event. And as you can see, we took a slightly sort of playful attitude towards it. So we did it on the site, but the cops were kind of like Keystone Cops. Next slide. We had a sort of marching band provide musical accompaniment. This is the band Environmental Encroachment. And so they kind of played on a horse-drawn carriage along with us, which gave this sort of festive air, even as we were sort of narrating this history. And next slide. But one thing I like to do with my events is most reenactments, they use sort of professional reenactors. So people who really sort of know the stories and really are sort of obsessed over the sort of details. I like to keep these events sort of free and open to everybody and interactive. And as a result, we get people from all sorts of age groups. So everyone was invited to kind of show up and participate as one of the striking laborers. So I had actors playing the police officers, but anybody who showed up in the public could be one of the striking workers. And people often took their own initiative and showed up in costume, which was great. And we made all these fake foam bricks and rocks. And what I discovered is that older people, right, in their 60s and 70s, and children particularly enjoyed hitting the police officers with the foam rods. There was an actor playing Alan Pinkerton at the reenactment, and there was one retired labor historian. She was in her mid-70s, and she got a squirt gun, because we also gave her a squirt, and she just went after Pinkerton the entire reenactment. She said her whole life she'd been waiting to shoot Alan Pinkerton. So, next slide. Sometimes though we do just kind of playful, silly things. So this is from a reenactment of the Mystery of Al Capone's Vaults, which you may remember Geraldo Rivera conducted. So we did this on the actual 24th anniversary of that infamous event, and we reenacted the entire broadcast in an actual vaulted space in an abandoned building. All right, next slide. But as I said, I tend to focus more on labor history and more serious events, and often ones that have been forgotten. So in March of the past year, I was invited by the Jane Addams Hull House Museum to work with them in a reenactment, and what we decided to do was the 1915 Hunger March. 1915 unemployment rates were much higher than they even are now, and so people decided to have this sort of spontaneous meeting, and then they were going to march to City Hall to basically demand public works projects. And the march was led by Lucy Parsons, who Alma Washington, who's sitting in the back, has often portrayed, and she's a former Algren Award recipient, and Alma very graciously agreed to reprise her role as Lucy at this event. And it was also, we worked with a group called Jobs for Justice, which is interested in kind of organizing unemployed individuals to kind of lobby on behalf of their interests, and they're a really great group. And so we were kind of using the event to sort of draw attention to their work and to the current economic crisis and unemployment. So next slide. As you can see, once again though, we involved some fake cops. This was great because we also had some mounted police as well. So we made little sort of horses that they could kind of wear over them. And so we marched up, we followed the original parade route. This event was significant in one way that it was led by Lucy Parsons and radicalized a bunch of very kind of young people in the city who would kind of continue this work to the next generation. It was also the very first time that Solidarity Forever was sung at a labor event. So Ralph Chaplin, who wrote the song, had just finished it earlier that morning, brought it out, and was performed at that event. So you can see people here going up Halsted along the original route, and the police officers trying to break them up. And they've got protest signs, which people brought, made on their own initiative, which is great. Okay, next slide. And this is just another image of the kind of crowd scene. The man in the bottom corner there is playing a police officer by the name of Make Mills, who was an early figure in the sort of Chicago Red Squad. The ironic thing about Make Mills is that he's actually the dad of Viola Spolin, who later went on to work at Hull House and created these theater games, which led to the Compass Players, which later led to Second City. So it's just a kind of interesting historical accident that her father was there breaking up the Hull House March. Next slide. But our most ambitious endeavor to date was last year when we did the 125th anniversary full-scale Haymarket reenactment. So for this, which Alma once again participated in, and then Bucky also participated in as well. He played there. And this was quite an undertaking. So it involved getting organizations from across the city. The Illinois Labor History Society worked with us, an arts festival, the Virgin Arts Festival, the Haymarket Pub and Brewery, which is down in Halston and Randolph, various sort of businesses, community groups, arts groups. And that's how we were able to get basically almost 200 people to play Chicago police officers and actually march up displays and kind of recreate that. And once again, the public was invited to all play a role. So everybody who showed up as part of the public was somebody who was there to listen to one of the anarchists speak. We ended up getting about 1,000 participants. Wow. And there was a lot of interest in it, of course, because this was when everything was going on up in Madison as well, right? And I think it's important for people to kind of be aware of these narratives and to be able to commemorate them so that you can kind of understand the sort of longer story, particularly because it seems like in our current political climate, there's a real move to basically return this country back to the conditions of the 1880s and the 1890s. And I think people need to be reminded that a lot of the things we take for granted today, people like the Haymarket 8 fought for, right? It was all part of the 8-hour workday. So next slide, please. And these are police officers. Once again, you can see a whole kind of range of people participating in it. This is immediately after the bomb went off. So we actually made a fake device that shot up oatmeal and flour and made a loud bang. And so then all this particulate matter kind of drifted back down on people, and there was a little melee. Next slide. But we did want to tell the whole story, and so we kind of told it in 3 parts. So we had the actual reenactment of the bomb going off, but then we did carry it forward to the execution of Parsons, Ingalls, Fishers, and Spies. And so this is Parsons right before the hood is put on his head, basically kind of calling out his last words. Next slide. This is John Langford, so along with Bucky, John Langford also played at the event. Here he's singing Annie Laurie, which is an old Scottish ballad which Albert Parsons sang in his prison cell the night before he was executed. So I'm really interested in all the sorts of ways in which like the history can be preserved, and so whenever I can go back and find original songs that were connected to the event, I'll often have them performed there. Weirdly enough, John is actually wearing a cross tie that once belonged to Bob Dylan. He told me. It's pretty cool. All right, and next slide. And here's Alma Washington as Lucy Parsons, who's one of the narrators. All right. And let's see, next. All right, this is last. And so the most recent thing that we did was back in November, and this was slightly different in character, although still kind of important to kind of radical politics in Chicago, and that is in collaboration with a woman named Meredith Milliron and another guy named Drew Durr from the Court Theater. We restaged the first performance of the Compass Players from 1955. We had to do it at Jimmy's because the Compass Tavern doesn't exist anymore, but it was a very sort of similar space. And it was a real challenge too, which is like, how do you recreate a performance that was largely improvised? But fortunately for us, we were able to find the original scenarios, we were able to go back and find the original Chicago Daily News articles that they used basically to kind of prompt some of their sketches. And it was really fun to kind of reflect upon how the Hyde Park community was in the midst of change at that period, because it was also during the urban renewal period as well. And so we could kind of use the performance to sort of tell that story. And this is a recreation of an actual photograph taken of that initial performance. So this is like the Mike Nichols, Elaine May era. So as Bucky said, we've got a bunch of things coming up in the spring. There's going to be Stutz Terkel related events, the first one being on May 6th at the Newberry Library. It's going to be a 100th birthday party. Once again, it's like free, open to the public. Anybody can come. We've got some great performers, some great speakers for that. And then later in the summer, we're going to have an event called Like a Secondhand Sea, which is going to be about the sort of history of the river and the lake. And I only bring that up now because the name of the event comes actually from Nelson Algren. If you read Chicago City on the Make, he describes, the Lake Michigan being like a secondhand sea. What?
For sale down there.
That's right, yeah. So thank you very much for your time, and once again, it's a very great honor to receive this award. I hope I give you the impression, though, that many other people deserve it, because I got a lot of help with all this stuff.